Good night and welcome all to Alternate Views. Just let me know if you can hear me well. Just let me know if you can hear me well, if you can see me well. Good night to all. Welcome to Alternate Views. Just let me know if you can hear me in the comments. Just let me know if you can hear me well in the comments. Let us get this show on the road, Alternate Views. I'm your host, Kemar Stuart. Welcome to the next program. Just doing a sound check. Just let me know if you can hear me well. So let me just welcome the early Patriot supporter, Mr. Angel, Vivian Yard, Sarah Nurse, Blake Vaughn, Deborah Law, Vaughn Second Fleet. Yes. Is my song clear? Like, you need more voice? One second. Mic check, mic check, mic check. Or if you can hear me well, just let me know if you can hear me. Someone is saying that I can see you, but we need more volume. So I'm testing the voice and we are on the road this evening. So yeah, so welcome everyone to Alternate Views. Tonight we'll be discussing the Central Bank report. Shout out to Nigel and Black Champion Lifestyle. Nigel be on, you know, as the night proceed. So she's saying that she's not hearing well. So something is definitely going on with the microphone. We're gonna have to So let us try that again. Let us try that again. If you hear me loud and clear now, it should be loud and clear now. It's very loud and clear now. So let's get that going. Yeah, everything is okay. Loud and clear. So welcome to Alternate Views. all alternate viewers. This is Kemar Stuart, your host, speaking. I want to welcome you to yet another Thursday on the program. As usual, our co-host Nigel, I will say, will be in, get comfortable. He'll be in, and we will welcome him in when he makes it. So, as usual, we start alternate views with a quote from the Living Bible, the Living Bible. So, says Nigel is not here to get that number. I would require somebody on the live tonight to give me a random number. Well, let me not get a random number. A random number will come when we get to the quotes. But I'm just going to dip into the Living Bible quickly, one verse, and well, somebody just yes, thanks, Sean. Yeah. Well, so my hand landed on Second Kings 15. 2 Kings 15, the Living Bible. My hand landed on 2 Kings 15, and it says, "Good and evil king, good and evil king." Okay. So it says, "New king of Judah, Azariah, name of his father Amaziah, the former king, name of his mother Jecoliah of Jerusalem. Length of his reign 52 years in Jerusalem. His age at the beginning of his reign 16 years old. Reigning in Israel at this time, King Jeroboam, who had been the king there for 27 years. Azariah was a good king, and he pleased the Lord just as his father Amaziah had. But like his predecessors, he didn't destroy the shrines on the hill where the people sacrificed and burned incense. Because of this, the Lord struck him with leprosy, which lasted until the day of his death. So he lived in a house by himself, and his son Jotham was the acting king. The rest of the history of Azariah is recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah. When Azariah died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Jotham became king. And the book went on to speak about, as they said, good and evil kings, and that of idol worship. You know? So Second Kings, dive into the book of the Living Bible. I always ask the Father to bless the show with his presence as we proceed this evening. So a big shout out to the sponsors this evening, Lifelong Learning. Um, Thank you very much, Lifelong Learning. We would like to say good evening to the Caribbean Progress Studies Institute, Mr. Rashid Griffith, Joshua Walcott, Shem Best, and all of the emergent ventures and the different personnel within the group. Good night to the entire EV panel. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So don't forget to like and share alternate views, critical information, relate to share with all Barbadians all over the diaspora, all over the world. We want to, bring the facts, bring the economic truth to the people. So this evening we'll be discussing the Central Bank of Barbados report. We'll be discussing the Central Bank of Barbados report, where we'll be analyzing what was said by the governor of the central bank, Dr. Kevin Greenwich. So we'll be analyzing what was said by Dr. Kevin Greenwich, the governor of the central bank, in his last review and report. So let me just cue that up and give the other alternate viewers a chance to get in the program this evening. So don't forget everyone to like and share tonight. Like and share tonight. We're discussing the Central Bank of Barbados's review of the Barbados economy, January to March 2025, which was just presented by Dr. Kevin Greenwich. We have a lot to say on this report, so I want to encourage you all to share this as wide as possible.
Share it on WhatsApp, share it in your different groups, share it among friends, family, as lifelong learning aims to, you know, provide the platform for persons all around the globe who are interested in Barbados' affairs to come on to alternate views and hear the facts and the true state of economics and other social topics plaguing Barbados. I'd like to also acknowledge, although we don't, really support politicizing the platforms, but I'd like to acknowledge all those persons who would have congratulated me on the formation of the new national party. So thank you very much. Right here on Alternative Views, thank you very much for the support you've given me. I want to express personal gratitude to those persons who are from the community of St. John. I want to express uh, personal gratitude to my family, um, to my parents, to my partner, Aisha, who's very supportive, and to my entire family, to all of my friends who are very supportive. Um, Thank you. You know who you are. At the right time, you all will be able to show yourselves, in support of the venture moving forward. So let me just acknowledge and say thank you to everyone. However, tonight we're not. This platform is dedicated to economic issues, and we will not be diving into that side. Tonight we will have a special edition. You heard it here, a special edition where we'll be discussing the new national party, the NNP Barbados, and what it aims to bring to the country of Barbados. Um, yeah, so I want to say a good night to other inspirational leaders out there like Captain Ibrahim Traore. Um, Thank you, sir. You know you're a guiding light for young persons like myself and those other people around the globe who watch you as a man of principle, as a man that we can follow, as a man who wants the best for his country and for his people. Um, Big respects to Ibrahim Traore. You are definitely an inspiration for us. Um, yes. So let me just head to the comments for a bit before we jump right in. We have Gal Biz who's saying good night. So good night to you, Gal Biz. I haven't seen you on for a minute, so good night to you. I hope you're doing well. Um, Big shout outs to you and the entire family, Keith and everyone, Pat and everyone. Good night to you. Good night to Patrick's Designs. Good night and blessings, everyone. Congratulations on forming the new party. May you be blessed and guided in moving forward. Thank you very much, Patrick. I appreciate you taking the time out to come on to Alternate Views. I appreciate your well wishes. Yes. So thank you guys very much. We're up at 35 persons up on the live. So just a reminder to like and share the program, like and share the program. We're discussing Governor of the Central Bank's report presented by Dr. Kevin Greenwich. We aim to bring our economic analysis fair and square. So I usually have a quote from my other good book, but I'm not seeing it right now. So we're gonna have to go with a quote from Alternate Views, the book. So Alternate Views, the book, people. Alternate Views, the book. I must remind you that is available again on Amazon. It is available again on Amazon. So if you want a copy of Alternate Views, just go on to Amazon.com and you'll be able to, get yourself a copy of Alternate Views. It's extraordinary presentation of research and economic analysis related to the Barbados economy from 2018 to November 2021, when Barbados declared itself a republic. So the book sets the scene basically for Barbados' plunge into the International Monetary Fund and the resultant economic programs which continue to impact on Barbados, a small island developing state. So the author, Kemar Stuart, unravels the intricacies of this policy option or painting a picture of the aftermath and also offering suggestions on the way forward. So this highly educational and informative book, Alternative Views, is an excellent tool for budding economists, politicians, public servants, and the general public who desire an understanding of the Barbados economy in a modern era. So if you read Alternative Views, you will definitely grasp a modern understanding of the Barbados economy. So let us take a quote from Alternative Views. Let's set the tone for tonight's discussion as to what is the Central Bank of Barbados's perspective on the Barbados economy. So, chapter 4, for those who have a copy of Alternative Views, you could go on and read. We're at chapter 4, page 71. Those persons who have a copy of Alternative Views, chapter 4, page 71. And it goes something like this. As the country progressed into the implementation of the IMF-supported Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan, many economists marveled at the seemingly good news being highlighted in the print media. The economic management of the Barbados economy has surprisingly and seemingly been transferred from the Ministry of Finance into IMF employee Dr. Kevin Greenwich, as he was the most vocal on all matters related to the Barbados economy. So, you guys recall at the time when the BERT program was crafted, Dr. Greenwich was a very key figure, a key spokesperson on the BERT plan. And remember, Dr. Greenwich would have started as the senior technical advisor to the government of Barbados, seconded directly from the IMF. So, in passing on, Dr. Whoa. My apologies, I just had a blackout. Whoa. Yeah, alternative viewers. So we just had a strange internet blackout. So I expect a lot more of this going forward, a lot more blackouts. So let's keep going, let's keep going. So I was speaking about, taking a quote from the book Alternative Views. Taking a quote from the book Alternative Views. So I was speaking about Dr. Greenwich and him defending the government's economic strategy. Alternative Views says that he would have provided overly optimistic outlooks as to the future of the Barbados economy. And this was much to the confusion of public onlookers. Right? So I think that is a position that still holds today. Overly optimistic positions on the performance of the Barbados economy. Now, nothing is wrong with having optimism, because if you participate in crafting government's economic strategy, definitely you would want it to work. Definitely when you speak, you will speak with confidence and poise to ensure that investors would buy in to your economic program. So nothing is wrong with having the confidence and the optimism that the economy will do well, but it confuses the average person who's saying that this over optimism does not necessarily um, match what we see, basically. Right? So, alternative views and quoting from that book said that academics such as Professor Don Marshall and Professor Michael Howard, and we're going to take a couple sections from Professor Michael Howard's writings tonight. Right? Edward Clark, who was the former chairman of the Barbados Private Sector Association, and Dr. Simon Natram, who was the president of the Barbados Economic Society. So alternative views went on to say that Dr. Natram, who openly challenged government's economic outlook, um, was appointed to sit on the board of the Central Bank of Barbados and subsequently went on to the International Monetary Fund. Uh, Ever so often and periodically, you see reviews from the yes, having some challenges, people, strange. But as I was saying, ever so often you will see periodic press releases from the International Monetary Fund speaking to the Barbados economy, detailing their findings on the Barbados economy, XYZ. So these meetings mainly will deal with what you call the Barbados Economic and Recovery Transformation Plan, or what you call the work plan. Right? So this is going to be important, the work plan. Right? So the work plan allows that the government has undertaken, allows the government to correct what they perceive to be the wrong things happening in the economy. So the work plan that allows government to borrow the money that it borrows from the IMF and these other institutions. So remember, this is Alternate Views, the book that we're quoting from. Okay, so you can grab yourself a copy, people, so that you understand. This book was very predictive of what we're going through right now. Right, so we're going to come back to Alternate Views. We're going to come back to Alternate Views after we show you what is happening in the report that was presented by the government. Let me also, express my, what's the word I'm looking for? Congratulations to the governor on his report, attempting to bring the issues to the people. Let me just say that my critiques are all very professional critiques. So this is a proper structured economic analysis that we want to provide on what the governor has said, a professional structured analysis. So we'd like the media can quote from this as well. You can quote me from these statements. So it says here on my screen, hoping that everyone can see clearly. It says here on my screen, basically, that this is the Central Bank of Barbados' review of the Barbados economy between January and March 2025. Right? January and March 2025. So it says here that Barbados maintained its economic growth momentum in the first quarter of 2025, and real GDP increased by an estimated 2.6%, led by strong performances in tourism, business services, and construction. Inflation continued downward in its downward trend despite record elevated global trade tensions with Trump and China Swizzy. Unemployment claims fell between January and February, but temporary closures in March linked to major renovation projects reversed these gains. And economic growth, together with stronger fiscal outcomes for the financial year, contributed to a further reduction in what they call debt to GDP. Okay. Now, this is a lot of confusing stuff, right? And I think it is actually meant to confuse you, right? So let me get a more simple version or reader friendly version for you that you could better follow my story, because that is just meant to confuse you. Now, ever so often we hear when a governor or the governor comes to give his reports to the people of the country as it relates to the performance of the Barbados economy. Right? Ever so often. And we listen to what the governor says, but how many of us actually read the reports that the governor produces at the same time that he gives his spoken version of that report? So the media goes to the conference, the media listens to what is being said by the governor, and then the media reports what is said by the governor. But I'm challenging tonight, how many of the journalists actually go and read the content of the governor's report? Right? Because if they did, usually what we see pop up in the paper would not pop up, which is basically some misrepresentations of the truth. So I am challenging the journalists to actually stop listening so much to what is being said, which could be curry flavored to suit particular narratives, and focus mainly on what is written in these documents. So let me get this up here big on the screen. Okay. So it says here, up and down. That's what it says here, very comfortable. Okay. That's what it says here, up and down. And it says, economy grows 2.6% amid record tourism, but growth forecast cut. Upgraded bird plan coming. So what does this statement by Dr. Greenwich mean? What could be interpreted by it? Like, is it good news? Is it bad news? What could be said by this particular statement right here? Right? Now, we hear about growth, right? We hear about growth. But where is the growth in Barbados coming from? Yes, sorry. We hear about growth. But what is this growth? So let us explain what this so-called growth could be, right? Remember what they said, that the growth came from record tourism, construction, hotels. Right? Let us go back to the statement. Right? It said 2.6 growth, so let us go back to the statement where it said here. Let me come where it said here. Get it up for you. Barbados maintained its economic growth momentum in the first quarter of 2025, where GDP increased by an estimated 2.6%. Here's where the growth was led by strong performances in tourism, right, business services, and construction. I'm going to repeat that. The growth, this 2.6% growth, came from a strong performance in tourism, business services, and construction, right? So let us go back to that page here again. It says up and down that economy grew based off tourism. It didn't have much detail, so you see already the difference in skilled reporting, right? You already see the difference in skilled reporting. So they say amid record tourism, but you didn't see business services, construction, as you didn't see that. I said, but growth forecast cut an upgraded work plan coming. Right. So as you know, the work plan is the IMF plan, which signifies that Barbados is intended to sign on to another IMF program. So that would be 3 back-to-back IMF programs for a small island developing state. And I am not sure that that is such a good place to be in for a small country like Barbados that is so heavily dependent on imports. So a country that has to import so much, being on the 3 IMF programs, but remember we were in the IMF program early, right, since the change of government. So we are signing 3 IMF programs to continue borrowing foreign currency to build our balance of payments to bring income, because the where do we earn foreign exchange from? Right? Where do we earn foreign exchange from? So the foreign exchange earnings are not doing it for us. So we have to borrow excess earnings, and we get those excess earnings from being part of the IMF program, having access to the 2 fund facilities, the extended fund facility, right? The extended fund facility and the resilience and sustainability trust. Barbados signed on to those 2 facilities. So signing on to a third IMF program will signify that Barbados continues to underperform as it relates to foreign exchange earnings, right? And that the government continues to prop up its balance of payments using debt, right? So this debt, which will then be added as income to the government, because remember the government will borrow it and then they spend it. So it will be income to the government and they will spend it. But then it becomes debt, foreign debt, external debt, placed on the taxpayers to repay. So that is where the challenge is. So here you have an admission that Barbados is going to sign on to another IMF program. This signifies that Barbados will more than likely continue with the current level of taxation, right, with the current level of taxation that it has, and therefore there will be no tax relief really headed for the people of Barbados. Right. So part of this BERT program, people, right, part of this BERT program is to focus on state-owned enterprises. So let us go to another page. Right. Let us go to another page. And let's look at the key takeaways key takeaways of the central bank's report as reported in the media. So hope everybody's following tonight. I hope all the alternate viewers are following tonight. So it says here, the growth forecast was revised downward. It was revised downward, which means that the economy is not liable to grow as we proceed. So if the economy is not liable to grow, right? If the economy is not liable to grow, as clearly here said, the growth forecast is down. Right? Now this particular projection of this growth forecast of 2.7, this is very much in line with the International Monetary Fund's downward rejection as well. So at the IMF spring meetings that were held very recently, the IMF had a downgrade in global economic outlook. And Barbados has the exact downgrade, right, as the International Monetary Fund. So let us do a quick breaking it down to layman terms, right? Let's make it simple. If the global economy is expected to contract by, for example, 2%, therefore the shocks and the shortages and the problems associated with that reduction would then transfer to smaller economies like Barbados, which usually take price, right? Price takers is usually transfer. So how could both the world economic outlook, right? How could both the world economic outlook, right? How could both the world economic outlook and Barbados' economic outlook could be equally downgraded at the same rate? So if the IMF downgrades its global outlook from 3% to 2.7, and Barbados downgrades its outlook from 3% to 2.7, could somebody explain to me how could that occur both at the same time, at the same rate? I would say that if the global economy slows down by 3% to 2.7, I would say that you should at least have to, there's an estimate, it would be Barbados' economic slowdown will be much substantially higher than that of the global economic outlook, given the fact that Barbados will be the person or the economy receiving the shock. Smaller economies will be the ones feeling the drawback and the downsides of a downward, on a downward world economic outlook. Right? So the smaller economies will have substantially more impact in terms of a downgraded forecast. So I would challenge this particular growth forecast, this particular downward. I would challenge that. I say that it should be substantially higher, right? Because it cannot be the same, or it cannot equate, in my estimation, it cannot equate that the world economic outlook slows down at the same exact rate that the Barbados economy will slow down at. Right? So I would challenge that particular growth forecast from that perspective. Right? And I also challenge it from the perspective where majority of the growth that we're experiencing is coming from debt, is debt induced growth. So you're borrowing money to gain income, spending the money in the economy, but it is not anything that you earn substantially, it's not earned revenue. You still have to pay it back in debt. So if you continue to borrow at substantial rates, sending on to another IMF program, borrowing from the IDB and these other banks some more, right? And using that as your main source of foreign income, right? Well, compiling that and registering it as growth, right? When you spend that money to expand these different services, XYZ, XYZ for temporarily. And then you register it as growth. Money that you borrow, that you spending, you register it as growth. Do you know, see how this particular growth forecast could be misleading alternative viewers? Like, so the Barbados economy is yes. Another internet blackout, people. Yes, people, another internet blackout. We had another internet blackout. Um, yes, we had another internet blackout. So every time the internet blacks out, I am going to inform you that the internet has gone again. Yeah. Yes, audience. Internet. Some serious trouble with the internet. Good. Testing, testing. Yes, alternate viewers, just let me know if That's alternate viewers. Just let me know if you can hear me, if you're back and functioning. We're having some challenges with the internet. I am not sure exactly what is happening, but somewhere else might know. But I'm hoping that I am back with you. Just let me know if you still have me. But yeah, so just work with me. You'll understand what may be happening here. This is voice information. Um, Text the media, then reach out to me for comment on the central bank's report. We do bring alternate views, so we're here to give a different perspective. Sean Cool is saying he won't call that income. That is a loan. The government's income is via taxation. Well, Sean Cool, in economics, these things happen. So if you have a loan, it's given over to you and it is income, right? It's temporary income for you to go and make whatever investment and then pay later. So it's the same in government. It's a loan of government. Government comes in, spends, um, does what it has to do, and then implements taxation to recover the necessary loans or the interest to pay off those loans. So that is the situation with this growth forecast, and the challenges growth forecast based off the fact that we are still using debt-induced projects through these policy loans to drive income in these particular areas. So yes, we're having some hotels going up. Um, is it all private investment? Is it all money from private investors? Is it money that we are gaining from the AADB, CDB? Um, the money that government borrowed from these institutions were used to rebuild public infrastructure, rebuild some of these roads that I'm seeing some roads. So this money that is spending that you could see comes from loan income provided from these external sources. Okay. So yes, people. So let us move on because they have taken my screen apparently. So I'm having challenges now sharing my screen with you. But nevertheless, though, let me continue as we were. So it says here on my screen, bird to shockproof Barbados. Right. Bird to shockproof Barbados. Really wishing I could get this up because y'all have to see this to really grasp the severity of it. So let us try this screen thing again. So remember, BERT, Barbados Economic Recovery Transformation Plan 3.0, set to save the country. So it is written, whoa. So apparently I am being locked out of my stream account, people. I am being locked right out of my stream account and I cannot seem to get back in, which is awfully strange. But the show has to go on. So it says BERT 3.0 to shockproof Barbados economy. And it says that it has what's BERT? Originally launched to address a crippling debt crisis through IMF-backed reforms. The homegrown BERT has evolved through three phases. BERT 1, which was in 2018, stabilization through fiscal consolidation and building foreign reserves. BERT 2, this is the pandemic era, they say, different growth initiatives with green transformation focus. So as you know, green will be the whole renewable energy, the whole oil sector transitioning to electric vehicles, electric panels, XYZ. You all know how that went with Lightning Power. BERT 3.0 now focuses on climate-ready reforms and institutional modernization. So what does that mean basically? Like public service digitalization to reduce bureaucratic inefficiencies, they said, and state-owned enterprise reform to curb fiscal drains, right? To curb fiscal drains. And then they went on to speak about workforce training programs with emerging. So remember we focus on BERT. Remember we focus on BERT. They just told you what BERT 3 is going to be like. So they said BERT 3 is going to focus on digitization, state-owned enterprises, to curb fiscal drains. That's basically financial drains. So all of those institutions, government institutions, which depend heavily on drawdowns and transfers from government, they are going to be the focus coming up in BERT 3. Right? They're going to be the focus coming up in BERT 3. So listen good, right? Listen good. quoting from alternate views, quoting from alternate views again, quoting from alternate views again. It says here that the BERT Economic Recovery Transformation Program set some targets in place. We're quoting from page 73 of the book Alternate Views. Okay. So it says here, the targets which Barbados has to meet include an improved fiscal deficit. So that's basically, fancy economic talk for what government makes, minus so the spending, less interest payments, right? So we don't want to get into that technically. No. A primary balance, which is basically minus what government earn, minus what they spend, right? A focus on debt and a focus on drawdowns from government, right? And a focus on drawdowns from government. So those entities like Water Authority and all of those government entities which heavily rely on transfers from government, they are going to be the focus. Right? They are going to be the focus. So yeah, we're still going. I'm still here with you. We're seeing 71 persons on. I still can't get back into my uh device. So I've been locked out completely so I can't share my screen with you. But I was saying here that this BERT program and this BERT 3.0 program that the governor of the central bank spoke about, right? And was focused on state-owned enterprises and fixing the fiscal drains, they said. This will heavily focus on cuts to government expenditure and cuts to state-owned enterprises, right, as they face restructurings, right? So the restructurings basically will be privatizations, right? Privatizations, public-private partnerships, right? Merging state-owned enterprises. So if you have 3 different government departments doing the same thing, they will merge all 3 into one. And also that will come with sustained job losses as you size down the public service to make it more efficient. It will come with job losses. Right? So remember now, having to sign on to BERT 3.0 to institute these new measures of tackling state-owned enterprises, tackling the Water Authority, which will definitely come with an increase in water rates at some point. Tackling the Barbados Light and Power to ensure that they keep the cap on electricity prices. Tackling the expenditure of the post office. So this is what we're facing in BERT 3.0. So I went on to say in alternate views that the economic team outlined government structural adjustment program as they will be looking to reduce the heavy burden that state-owned enterprises were placing on the government's purse to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. Right, so here you have it. So it was admitted in the newspaper and also in the press conference that BERT 3.0 will definitely focus on these state-owned enterprises and plugging those expenditure leaks. So Dr. Kevin Greenwich, right, well, he was the IMF representative for the BERT program, outlined that in the first 18 months of BERT 1, right, that the state-owned enterprises would undergo some transformation and at that time, at least 1,000 workers went home in BERT 1. Right, so if 1,000 workers went home in BERT 1, hey, you have BERT 2, which was during COVID time, so the government had to fight to retain workers because they didn't want a massive unemployment crisis. So they borrowed heavily, kept people employed, and you didn't have that massive burst in unemployment as you normally would. Like, so the government kept on people doing birth two. So here comes birth three now. Like those persons who were to go home in birth two will more than likely have to go home now in birth three, right? Because 1,000 persons went in birth one. You couldn't get anything during COVID in birth two. So here you have it in birth three. So CDC set to restructure, the Gymnasium Limited set to restructure. So let me just take that quote from Alternate Views. And it says here that aspects of the birth plan noted that several mergers were recommended, included that of merging of the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation, is merging CBC, the GIS, and the government printery into one entity, right? Into one entity, merging the gymnasium, right? The gymnasium, merging the gymnasium and the National Sports Council and the Cultural Industries Development Authority and the NCF into one entity. Right? So think about it, when you shut down 4 entities and merge it into one entity with the intention of reducing the expenditure to run those 4 entities, do you believe that the government will continue to maintain the wage levels that they were paying before the restructuring? The idea is to restructure and cut expenditure, and one of the biggest line items for government is wages and salaries. Okay. Operating expenses and wages and salaries. So the biggest line items of expenditure for government. So government has to cut down the wage bill in many of these SOEs moving forward in birth 3. Because if you don't do it in birth 3, then you're going to roll over to birth 4. And then at what point does MS say, well, I'm not lending you any more money because you're not doing what you're supposed to do? Right? So the longer the government prolongs making these recommended changes, the changes they agree to with the IMF, the longer they take to implement these changes, the further and further and further and further away our chances of getting out to the IMF's program are going. Right. So I went on to say Alternate Views, Barbados' Economic Road to Republic, that the Transport Board. Dr. Gwyneth said that while handling the Transport Board, that he stated that the target was to reduce a $123 million bill by at least $30 million, which could be done through an increase in bus fares and moving to mobile payments to reduce accounting needs. So that's basically the cashless system in Transport Board. So the Transport Board was receiving $123 million, and to cut $30 million from the expenditure of the Transport Board, the government increased bus fares from $2 to $3.50 and said that they would like to go over to digital and the cashless system. Now, we saw the attempt to roll out the cashless system. That was an absolute failure. The cashless system got nowhere either on public or private transportation. So the intended changes or the proposed changes under the IMF program, like we never realized the true benefits or the savings through the privatization of the Transport Board. We never realized the true savings when we increased the bus fares because you still didn't put the cashless system in place. So it never met the intended economic target of trying to reduce the overall bill to the Transport Board by the intended amount. Right? So I hope you're seeing what is going to happen through all of the other government entities. Remember, the Grantley Adams International Airport, right? The Grantley Adams International Airport is intended to be leased out to an overseas company, like the Sheikh of Dubai, and I think it's called it's a Spanish Universalis SCA in Chile. So the airport, a national asset like the airport, set to be leased out for 30 years. Right? Barbados Water Authority set to be placed in a public-private partnership and partially privatized. So after that, you can see what is the main revenue earner for the Barbados Water Authority. What's the main revenue earner? Water. So to cut major expenses from the Barbados Water Authority, obviously you would have to increase water rates to be able to, recover expenses, XYZ, XYZ. Right? Only common sense, right? Because we're dealing with common sense. This is not the space for people who believe that they have a doctorate and this super education above everybody else. This is the space for the average man. This is the space for the man who have no degrees. This is the space for the man who have no CXCs. This is the space for everybody not to feel excluded. Like, this is a space for lifelong learning. So a common sense thing would tell us, like, that through this BERT 3.0 that was promoted by the governor, we could see substantial structural changes through the other state-owned enterprises. Right? So, what they did at Transport Board, they went on to say that they would have a process where they have the drivers, and the drivers would own their own buses, and the sanitation workers would own their own trucks, right? And they would commit to some form of public service. So the government is saying, well, we're going to provide these loans, to the drivers. Right? The drivers will go and buy buses, get loans from us, go and buy these buses, and come and provide a public service. Right? Come and provide a public service, a minimum public service of providing public transportation, and the government will pay you a check at the end of every month, week, whatever. Same thing for sanitation. If you want to own a sanitation truck, now a sanitation truck is not cheap. So I don't know how many sanitation workers right now could afford a sanitation truck, even on loan, and live long enough to pay off that loan, and to be able to provide the service of sanitation on behalf of the government of Barbados to the people of Barbados, and receive a check from government every month. So more than likely, the persons who own trucks already, or who are wealthy enough to invest in sanitation trucks, will be the first ones to benefit if the government continues to go the way of structural adjustment and privatization of these state-owned enterprises, which they said has a fiscal drain on public finances. So we are explaining tonight, in simple terms, a fiscal drain. How do they plug fiscal drains? What tactics do they use to plug fiscal drains? And you could clearly see what is on the horizon for the Barbados economy, despite what is being said in the media, despite the feel-good announcements, despite the optimism. These are the facts that are actually written on paper, and not necessarily any twisting or anything to suit a particular narrative. So, Alternate View says at page 75 that with the Barbados Water Authority, there are considerable savings to be had. The true cost of running that is somewhere in about 120 million, and government is targeting to at least save 60 million from that. So 120 million to run the water authority in transfer or subvention or what you want to call it. And the government was seeking to cut that transfer by 60 million. So where could you get $60 million, or where could you cut $60 million from the water authority? Right. So here you have now the imposition of the garbage and sewage tax. Right. So the government is saying, well, we're going to cut $60 million from the water authority's budget, but the water authority still has to function. So the government implements the garbage and sewage tax, and now the garbage and sewage tax collection, which is collected directly by the water authority, will go straight into running the water authority, as opposed to coming through central government and the consolidated fund. Now the challenge with that is that the water authority, somebody should ask when last the water authority produced financial statements, right? Somebody should ask when last the water authority, along with many other state-owned enterprises, although it was instituted in law in the Public Financial Management Act that was passed by this administration, which says that financial statements are to be produced within a specific time period, and the Minister of Finance has the ability and the authority to sanction any public entity, state-owned entity, right? Sanction any state-owned entity which does not comply in producing financial statements within the required time period. Right? But if you look across many of the state-owned enterprises, you will see that many of them do not produce annual audited financial statements. And that was one of the arrangements with the IMF. Right? That was one of the arrangements with the IMF. So here you have another target that the government agreed to the IMF, to have state-owned enterprises producing these financial statements every year. They're still doing, but still every year or every couple of months you hear the government met all of the targets. The government met all the IMF targets. Clearly not true. Clearly not true. If that was so, we would have financial statements for every state-owned enterprise available. We would have a public register of contracts, right? A public register of contracts that was supposed to be stored at Kaipo. So those are two IMF targets that was in every IMF document since 2018 on Barbados, and the government never met either of the two. So you know why they will not meet the other two, because those two deal directly with transparency. So to have that public register of contracts where any of us could go on and see who the government is giving government contracts to and the price these contracts are at, and have black and white to quote from, that's like snow falling in Barbados. But the government of Barbados agreed with the International Monetary Fund that it should have been done. It wasn't done, and therefore I challenge the government to come and say why it wasn't done up to date, and why can't we have access to a public register of contracts, which was restored at Kaipo. We had two amendments passed to the Procurement Act coming through the Senate. Still nothing up to this day. So Barbados falls down completely as it relates to revolutionizing the public service and creating any level of transparency. Straight F. Straight F. Feel big time. So more money being borrowed, less transparency. We're seeing a smashing the messages and confused messaging coming out from the institutions that we're supposed to trust. But again, we listen to political actors as opposed to reading the facts on the paper. What is being said on the paper? Now, had we read a lot of what the government was proposing in terms of legislations and acts and agreements, we would have been way wiser as to what we're hearing now in regards to the economic truth for Barbados. So, Alternate views, page 75 as we continue. They also propose a merger between the Rural and Urban Development Commissions and a merger between the National Housing Corporations, who are basically doing the same thing, and that should be rationalized. So you saw recently in Barbados, there was a merger of the Urban Development Commission and the Rural Development Commission. You could clearly see why that merger came about, a recommendation from the IMF that they should be rationalized, that they do the same thing. Um, I still don't quite understand what happened with the restructuring of the National Housing Corporation, um, and what this entity is called now, which is HOPE. So National Housing was responsible for building government's housing policy. Then the government created a new entity called HOPE Inc. And HOPE Inc. is being tasked to build up government's economic strategy. Um, as far as I know, HOPE Inc. is 100% owned by government. 100% owned by government. So it's a government entity. So it is the same thing as National Housing Corporation. But still government created an entire entity called HOPE. And then government, the Auditor General could speak about HOPE. We could speak about HOPE because, as you guys will remember, it, it was Kemar Stuart who actually bet the cat on the HOPE project, basically. Right? So, how was HOPE funded? HOPE was funded by the HOPE project, was funded by a loan facility from the Housing Credit Fund through the Central Bank of Barbados. Right? HOPE project. The HOPE project was funded by a loan facility from the Central Bank called the Housing Credit Fund. Right? We all know what happened with the HOPE project. It went bust. I know the Auditor General of Barbados is deeply concerned about the lack of transparency and about what happened at the HOPE project. So there's clearly some corruption there. Yet again, on transparency, you receive another F. You received another F on transparency. So coming true. It was also said you get what I'm saying here. Well, I really like to get my screen back up, but no luck. But we're gonna try one more time because we're really dealing with the central bank report. But all of this information is necessary for us to unravel what you're seeing in your face. Like, unravel what you're seeing in your face. So I want to go on now to take a quote. Not a quote, but to read a section. Right? To read a section from Professor Michael Howard and his book. Right? And his book. And the question asks, are public entities inefficient? Are they inefficient? So various economists, according to Professor Michael Howard, would have said that there are various explanations for the term inefficient. And there are various terms that could explain what inefficiency. And it went on to speak about the economics of privatization. And it said that the major economic issue involved in privatization is that of efficiency. Property rights theory suggests that public enterprises operating in competitive markets should be privatized, and the argument applies to manufacturing industries, airline industries, and other competitive service industries. Competition provides greater incentive to private managers to increase allocative and productive efficiency. Right? So you hear that? The economics of privatization. So the intention in government saying we're looking to privatize and to plug these so-called fiscal leaks. Privatization is the recommendation coming down the chute. Right? So we're reading a bit from Michael Howard's work. We're reading and Professor Michael Howard gives some examples of when government divested some of its private assets. He gave explanations. He gave explanations of Trinidad's IMF experience, Barbados, not Barbados, Jamaica's IMF experience, right? And then he gave Barbados, Professor McCahorry gave Barbados between 1986 and 1991. So according to McCahorry, he said, the Barbadian government adopted an attitude towards, it said, an ambivalent attitude towards divestment. It says the manifesto of the government at the time, which assumed power in 1986, stated that the public sector must continue to play a role in the provision of private goods. Another blackout, guys, another blackout. Let's keep counting them. Another internet blackout. Yeah. But as I was saying, the government at the time indicated that the public sector must continue to play a role in the provision of private goods and services for purchase by individuals. It was the intention of the government to invest in and promote the production and distribution of private goods in areas where government initiative is required. The government strategy had three major objectives: to emphasize joint ventures between government and the private sector, to put an end to the practice of allowing publicly owned businesses producing non-strategic goods to continue to incur losses, and three, to undertake complete divestment in cases where analysis reveals that such action is required. And there is strong evidence to support the view that the government was in favor of a plan to privatize what it called the Hilton Hotel at the time, the Haywards Holiday Village Hotel, and the Arawak Cement Plant. And this position was articulated by Barrow, the Prime Minister at the time, and his plan rested on the view that the taxpayers should be relieved of the burden of supporting these enterprises, since the tax money could be more efficiently used for providing housing. Further, Barrow sanctioned that the discontinuation of the government-owned Caribbean Airways in 1987 because the national airline was losing at the rate of Barbados $9 million, like $9 million a year on $9 million a year on two flights a week from Britain to Barbados. So Barrow's approach to divestment heavily rested purely on the argument that it was necessary to reduce the high cost of government of operating in inefficient manner. It should be noted that the Transport Board, which operated with large annual deficits, was not on government's agenda for divestment. Perhaps the government regarded the Transport Board as a strategic good in a social sense and refused to privatize it. Shortly after his death, Barrow decided against privatization of Hilton and here was an Iraq cement plant. But between that period, there does not appear to be any documentary evidence to suggest that the government was firmly in favor of the divestment of public sector enterprises, and the IMF program in 1991. Right? The IMF program in 1991, people, required that the government of Barbados to reduce its transfers or drawdowns to these state-owned enterprises, and that the government appeared to be under pressure from the IMF and the World Bank to privatize certain public enterprises. The IMF letter of intent October 1991 acknowledged that the government's intention of divesting certain private enterprises, including the Iraq cement plant, Quail Dairy, and Cherry Cargo. Right? So clearly, you could see, people, that there was always the philosophy existing in the world that Barbados needed to divest some of its government enterprises. Right? The philosophy was there since 1986. Leaders, all we had from El Barro straight back down, believed that some institutions should be kept for social good. So there was a declaration that Transport Board providing of social goods should not be sold. Um, However, we saw the most drastic increase in bus fares under the Burt one. So I am saying to you, people, that when you have stabilization programs, right? Stabilization programs within a country, you have to look for these type of, I would say, policies to be rolled out, cost cutting measures, revenue earning measures, privatizations. This is what this all means, right? So there's nothing really to be celebrating, because it is painful measures that have to be implemented in which the people will feel regret. Sorry. So Barbados went to the IMF on October 4th, 1982. Barbados went to the IMF on September 17th, 1991. And then Barbados went to the IMF around May 2018. Right? So 3 different times. The first 2 times we had short stabilization programs, but this is actually the first time that Barbados had to go back to the IMF 3 times back to back. Not even Jamaica had it this bad. Right? 3 times back to back. That is not a good place to be in, as I said, for a small open economy experiencing declines in exports, and especially exports never at a level sustainable enough to provide enough foreign income. We always operated in deficit as it relates to foreign exchange, so that's where we constantly have to borrow. Imports becoming more expensive, and therefore Barbados will continue to borrow at a never-ending cycle. Entering into Burt 3 should indicate to you that we are not getting out of this economic vortex anytime soon, because really and truly we should have had Burt 1, and that should have been the end of Barbados' experience with the IMF. We should have probably paid back the IMF already, but because of the severity and the damage to the overall Barbados economy, we have to utilize IMF resources and other resources as a means of income, because where else will we get income to continue to maintain government that at the size that is at right now? Like, we have one of the largest public sectors in the world. I mean, for a small country this size of the world, right? And we don't have any economic resources. And we don't have any economic resources like oil and bauxite. And we don't have any manufacturing industries that earn a substantial amounts of foreign exchange. We don't have that. Okay. we earn through taxation and those type of means, more service oriented means. So a country with such a large public service, such a huge government, not earning but borrowing and taxing, um, eventually you end up with a choice. Unfortunately, we are getting closer to that choice. And this government or any government, let's just say if it's an NMP government, um, we're going to have to work substantially hard to maneuver Barbados around in a very little breathing space that we have. Right? So how do we plan for Barbados' future and try to escape the debt cycle that was induced by basically signing 3 IMF programs? Right? So any questions from the audience so far? Any questions from the audience so far? Just shoot me a question and I would definitely respond. I hoping my screen comes back. Really hoping my screen comes back. So tell me guys if you can see my screen. It should be coming up. It should be coming up. Tell me if you can see it. Please hoping you can see it. Yep. Yeah. Well, I tried getting this thing on my screen. It should be up on my screen, but yeah, this is not working out, people. Um, really can't get back into my account. Yeah. Anyhow, let's keep moving on. Let's not get distracted. So I want to quote some further facts for you, alternative viewers, from the actual report, from the actual report, from the actual report of the central bank. Let us compare what we're seeing there. Ah, yeah, working out now. So, Bert, we just went through the entire Bert program, the Bert 3, Bert 1, Bert 2, Bert 3, and we expressed to you what we thought about it. So everything that we would have said just now is right here on the screen. So we like to put the facts up. So Bert 3 to shockproof Barbados. So Bert 3 is another IMF program, which means that Barbados is likely to go along another austere measures and signing on to this IMF program. So Bert 3. So this is one of the outstanding points of the governor's presentation. And this part here about Bert 3 should be the focus. Right? Because majority of Barbados' policy planning surrounds the IMF Bert program. We can't get around it in any how. So let's zoom in a little closer on what's Bert. So it clearly shows you what they intend to do. You already know about privatization. Pop digitization. That is digital ID, online payment for services, moving to the cashless public service, less paper, more online. Don't know what that is about already. Workforce training programs align with emerging labor needs. Um, this is one of the planks of the NMP. This was included in our brochure. Emerging labor markets, a focus on emerging labor markets. And we spoke about the labor market emergence in Barbados. We'll be having African nationals, CARICOM nationals from Guyana, Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, many Caribbean nationals coming in, many international uh, guests flowing in. And this is definitely one of the planks that was published in our brochure recently for the NNP. But as we said, no politics, no party tonight. Um, yeah. So Bert, treat. So let us go in a little deeper tonight. So we're up at 80 persons so far, and they're having a good discussion. So let me answer a couple of questions here quick. Square 4, good night to you. Square 4, good night. Ronald Roach, Tyrone Nurse, good night to you all. Square 4 is saying all at the transport board, I would have been on the statute book of Barbados. And when anything is on the statute book, it shouldn't be touched or sold. That is what Square 4 is saying. Some people would agree, some people wouldn't agree. So, contending views, Square 4. Well, Kingdom Citizen is saying if Barbados does not have any revenue generating measures besides taxes and tourism and a few other sources, what choice do we have but to go to the IMF? Are there any alternatives? Well, there's always an alternative, but I guess the challenge in Barbados is you don't mind there being an alternative, but right now you have a boatload of consultants being paid to come up with these alternatives, right? So you have people saying, well, they should be compensated for their knowledge. Because let's be frank, people like to use and abuse the intellectual capacity of people, and they don't like to compensate them in any how. So that is something you should consider. If we're looking at solutions, if we're talking solutions, um, yeah, something to definitely look at. No, I want to show you guys. I want to show you guys some of what the good Dr. Kevin Greenidge was saying factually, not necessarily what was said on the press conference, but some of what was said. Right. So let me just show you which document I'm quoting from. This document here is the review of Barbados' economic performance, right? So let us go in, dive in. Yeah, let's go in and dive in. Show you a few things here. Hey. So you guys remember, I want to touch on this tourism thing, right? So hoping you're seeing my screen here very well. This is the governor's report here. Right? This is the governor's report here. So it says here that the economic activity in Barbados. The traded sector, right? The traded sector registered a growth of 4%, right? And this was supported by strong cruise and long stay visitor arrivals, while agricultural output declined due to adverse weather. The non-traded sector expanded by 2.4%, reflecting continued investment by both public and private sectors. Right. So remember they say that the GDP in Barbados was increased by, as you can see right here, expansions in tourism. What type of tourism? Supported by strong cruise and long stay visitor arrivals. Agricultural output declined due to adverse weather. Now, I want to ask a question. Could anybody who lives in Barbados explain to me what type of adverse weather we had in Barbados that would cause agricultural output to decline? And explain it to me that how could the central bank report in the previous report during COVID years that agriculture was the only sector to grow during COVID in the middle of a volcanic eruption, and you had better agricultural output than you had in bright old sunny Barbados. So unless we live in two different Barbadoses where there's hail and snow and dry scorched earth that food can't grow, does somebody explain to me what is the adverse weather that caused the agricultural output to decline in Barbados? Because I'm honestly a bit confused, and I would like somebody to say it to me. Mervyn Mars is saying drought and heat. Um, Barbados was always a hot place, and there are countries all across the world with more severe heat growing food. Right? Now, if you say uh, a lack of water, if you said a lack of water, right, or if you said a lack of rainfall, or we said adverse weather. So adverse weather can mean it's either extremely hot, as you rightfully said, or it's extremely cold, or it's extremely some type of natural occurrence. So what really is the adverse weather happening in Barbados that will cause the output to decline? Open the explanation. I just think that there's a lack of investment in agriculture. I also believe that the impasse with the sugar industry is quite embarrassing as well. And there's no serious structured program in place to feed the people of Barbados by investing in agriculture. Because I would love to see the adverse weather conditions existing in Barbados. Anyhow, strong cruise and long stay visitor arrivals. Right. Remember this, what they're saying, expanded the Barbados economy, gave us this 2% growth, 2.6% growth. Strong cruise and long stay visitors. Now, cruise, let me just say something. Is it possible that the government is counting those persons who would come here, they would catch a plane from Europe, come here, right, take a layover to a cruise? They call it a transfer. Barbados is it true that Barbados is a transfer stop? That persons come from traveling on these Norwegian cruise lines and these other European cruise lines. Persons take planes here and then use companies like Foster and Nix and so to do transfers. So you have transfers from the airport to the seaport, and then the persons board the ships and then head off into the sea. And the only thing that coming back to Barbados is when they, hopping back on the boat, probably to get another transfer flight back where they're going. Can the government answer if they're using that metric to increase visitor arrivals in Barbados using transfers, air to sea, transfer, sea to air, if they're using those transfers and including them in overall visitor arrivals, because that will definitely not give us an accurate picture as to who's actually coming and who's actually spending money within the Barbados economy. So just going by what was reported in the Central Bank's report, this is the actual report and not what was said on TV, the document. So strong cruise tourism. As far as I know, I've not seen any big song and dances. I've not seen any PR exercises really highlighting that the Barbados port is constantly filled with ships, all berths filled. I haven't seen it really, but as we said, I know for a fact that so many air to sea transfers are happening through the Grand Islands International Airport and the Barbados Seaport coming out from Europe. So let us put that to the test as we read this report to find out if that speculation is actually true, right? Because we don't think it will get an answer from the government, but let us answer it based off what the governor is saying in his report. This is a very comprehensive report, by the way. So, just let me applaud the officials over at the bank for doing their thing. Okay. Let me just applaud the officials over at the bank. It's a very comprehensive report. So, it went on to say in tourism, right? This is our main earner. This is the main thing that we depend on. It went on to say that long stay performance supported by key source markets, right? So long stay arrivals increased by 2.4% for within the United States, recording a 13% increase supported by different flight routes open from different parts of America. European arrivals climbed by 13.9%, aided by targeted marketing efforts, while arrivals from Canada and CARICOM had modest growth. Right? A lower seating capacity from the United Kingdom contributed to a 7.2% decline in arrivals from the UK. So the English visitors are not coming so much. There was a drastic cutoff in visitors from the UK based off what the governor is saying. Now, remember I told you about those air to sea transfer flights from Europe. So we are clearly saying here that European arrivals climbed by 13.9%. But remember that England, the UK, is also in Europe. So how do you have a 7.2% decline in UK visitors? So you have an overall increase, a 13.9% increase in European visitors. But the UK, which is in Europe, is declining so drastic. Right? So ask yourself, how many flights the Virgin Atlantic cut from Barbados? What other airplane flies into Virgin Atlantic? British Airways. How many flights have they cut from Barbados? How many flights did they cut from Barbados? Right. So let us go down. Before we move on, United States, right? The United States seems our biggest source market now for tourists, right? United States. Stick the United States in your minds and don't let it go. Hold on to the United States. Right? So let us go past that. And let us look at the tourist arrivals. Let's look at the tourist arrivals in Barbados. Right? Look at the tourist arrivals in Barbados. For 2025, approximately 234,310,000 tourists arrived in Barbados. Right? So we had 5,482 more tourists arriving in Barbados as compared to 2024, right? And it shows you clearly here where the tourists are coming from, how many etc., etc. So you see that there's a massive drop off, a big drop off, in fact, in UK tourists. Like, hope you're seeing it here. You see that there's a massive drop off in UK tourists. Like, a big drop off in UK tourists. But the United States is growing in tourism. Canada, not much is happening. Right? It's the same thing basically. Not much is happening from the Canadian market. Not much is happening from CARICOM and Europe. You can see that only 1,500 more persons came, but overall 7,000 persons stopped coming. So you can clearly see with the tourism figures based off this and these different projections, right, that what was said in the media, when you look at this, you can get a much brighter picture strategically, right, and see where our tourists are coming from, where they're not coming from, and see that we have a massive problem on our hands as it relates to tourist arrivals. And I consider this to be an overstatement of the tourist arrival numbers based off the fact that the government may be using air to sea transfers and those persons arriving here not really staying in the economy per se, but just passing through a transfer. The government may be using those air to sea transfers to boost up numbers, tourist arrival numbers, to give the overall impression, that there may be growth in terms of visitor arrivals to Barbados. Right? So I'm hoping you see this. And I'm hoping that you understand it. I'm hoping that you see it. And I'm hoping that you understand it. But this is alternate views, different perspective. So we're going to move past this. So it says here, cruise tourism reached a historic peak. In transit, cruise passenger arrivals increased by 37.1% to reach 385,468 visitors. In transit passenger arrivals. So that is the same point that I made. And here is the Central Bank of Barbados reporting in its publication that in transit cruise passengers and their arrivals increased by 37.1%. Right? So it shows you that they're using in transit passenger arrivals to boost up the numbers. But what level of spending are these in transit passengers incurring in Barbados? And what benefit financially is there from using these in transit passenger arrival numbers? What benefit is there by doing that? Right? So you saw earlier, right, that the government boasts of record tourism. Remember you saw it on the screen earlier, right? Remember you saw it on the screen earlier, record tourism. Right, let us go back. Let us go back. It says here, economy grows 2.6% amid record tourism. Right? Record tourism. No. What I saw just now In your opinion, in your opinion, those tourism numbers they showed you look like record tourism numbers? Hey, in your opinion, alternate viewers, hey, in your opinion, hey, do those numbers, hey, do those numbers look like record level numbers too? Because remember, I showed you guys just now. I showed you guys just now the tourism numbers, and we're going to try to get them back here. Ah, right. So I say record, no record tourism numbers. So again, some confusion here. Right. So let me try to get that fixed before I show that again. So I say record tourism numbers. So let me ask you guys. It said that the government was using in transit figures. Here's there in transit figures to, and it had this 37% increase in it, and then it shows you clearly that where this increase was coming from, it was coming directly out of Europe, and they said that those European cruise liners, those big European cruise liners, haven't air to sea transfers. There's so many young Barbadians working at the airport and the seaport um, within that area of the economy air to sea. Right. So let me take a second out to welcome a good man, co-host Nigel. So let me get Nigel in. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Welcome Nigel Franklyn to Alternate Views.
All right. Blessed love, everybody. Good to be back. Apologies for joining the show so late, but as an entrepreneur, you gotta move and shit as it comes. But glad to be here. I was listening in all the time. Uh, Real lesson you're giving, Mr. Stewart. This is some very pertinent information as always. Um, I, this is and one thing that stood out to me. I'll just add this real early. You spoke about how the BERT program is affecting the merger of the GIS and CBC. I know of someone personally that recently told me that their position was angst for whatever reason, but she was in her early 60s. Looking forward to her retirement in the next 5 to 6 years. I know she has to not worry about how is she gonna finish up making a living and thinking about that less pension she's gonna receive. So it is always interesting to hear these things and then see it happening and affecting people close to you. They say it doesn't affect you until you could feel it for yourself. So I could definitely see these things actually affecting society and people that I know. So again, thank you for sharing all this information because I'm pretty sure had they known the forecast, which as you said is in your book, alternate views, but had this information been presented on a more national level so people could actually prepare themselves or at least put some things in place to alleviate what is to come.
Yes, sir. Well, welcome to the program, my brother. It was good to have that personal perspective on what we're discussing. So, real time, real life issues. I'm
Hmm.
sure many persons on here can relate to what we are saying. I'm sure many persons have that alternate view. Also, so Nigel, it was good to have that introduction. So we're hoping that you could join in the discussion along the way, because we were discussing visitor arrivals in Barbados. We're touching on the governor of the Central Bank of Barbados, and what he would have reported in his publication. Right? So we're trying to focus on the facts on paper versus the impressions that were printed in the media, and this is all professional critique. You know, um, yeah, this is all professional critique. So I was discussing these visitor arrivals and how there could be an overstatement, I believe. There could be an overstatement, I believe, in what we are calling visitor arrivals in Barbados, where you're saying that in a cruise tourism peak, in transit cruise passengers arriving in the country, and we're using that as a yardstick to say, well, hey, we're having a record increase in tourism, but Barbados is not necessarily the chosen destination of an in transit person. Huh? So I remember when I went to Ireland, I transited through the UK, but I didn't go to the UK. UK was not my destination of choice at that time. So if the UK uses me as a statistic in their visitor arrivals, I'm sure that the arrivals could be skewed. So any perspective from you?
I mean, it, okay, let's look at it. I'm going to choose to look at it from another perspective. So it would be in the interest of those to skew those numbers, to report more likable information. However, the integrity would be questioned at that point, and that is what you're pointing out. And the numbers are showing that uh, if someone is traveling to another island, Barbados doesn't benefit from any of their income, any of their presence on the island. It's just in transit. They just visit. So I would agree with you wholeheartedly that those numbers could be skewed, and probably the numbers will show for themselves as you have this information here in front of us.
Yeah, agreed, my brother, agreed. So yeah, so we need to have a better understanding of the true tourism arrival numbers, and then that would be better. That would allow us to better gauge a future forecast or projection for tourism in its sense, and give us a better gauge of forecast for overall growth and economic activity. Um, so yeah, that is something that needs to be fixed. The reporting of tourism arrival numbers, and as I said, I can be quoted from this program tonight. So I'm just scrolling through a couple of things here of what we're looking at the screen. Um, as you know, I want to get to a particular point. Ah, this part here speaks to merchandise trade developments, right? Remember, this is the governor of the central bank's report, and he reported that higher imports and lower exports of goods widen the merchandise trade deficit. So the deficit expanded by 143 million compared to first quarter of 2024. Imports increased by 13.3%, driven by higher demand for machinery, food and beverages, and hybrid and electronic vehicles. Right? So it shows you that there was an increase in spending from the merchants, Nigel, to be able to buy um, goods or more goods, as I say, machinery, food and beverage, vehicles, etc., etc. So
Yeah, we definitely saw the influx of those hybrid vehicles on the road in Barbados.
I want to touch on the foreign reserves because everybody knows that our foreign reserves are borrowed reserves. We don't earn enough, so I wouldn't analyze these reserves tonight, Nigel.
Mhm.
Um, ah, so the central bank reports. This is a good one here. Like, the central bank reports in understanding Barbados's merchandise trade structure. So it says here now that Barbados basically remains structurally imbalanced with dependence on a few trade partners. Right? A few trade partners, Nigel. As a small open economy with limited natural resources and a modest manufacturing base, right? Which means we got no manufacturing, or a very minute, limited resources. Barbados relies heavily on imports for domestic consumption and production. Right? So while the merchandise exports generate foreign exchange, Nigel, when you send things overseas, it's when we send rum and sugar and those things, we earn foreign exchange and grow. However, those earnings have not been substantial enough compared to what we spend on imports. So we do export, Nigeria, but we don't export even a quarter of what we're spending. So we're always in deficit. And how do you cover deficits, Nigeria? You have to borrow, right? So for small, open economy like Barbados, to cover our foreign exchange deficits, we have to borrow. And who's willing to lend us foreign exchange, Nigeria, as a small, open economy that is indebted? The IMF,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? The IMF. So that brought us to the IMF. Now, it says here, Nigeria, which is very interesting. I didn't need persons to hear this, and this will be very interesting for you as well. It says the US stands as Barbados' number one trading partner for goods. Between 2002 and 2024, the United States, Trinidad and Tobago, and the United Kingdom were Barbados' top three trading partners over that particular review period. And the United States is Barbados' largest import source, supplying nearly 0.5% of US source goods from domestic production and 11.5% through exports. So it clearly shows you that the United States dominates Barbados as it relates to
Absolutely.
trade, Joe.
Sure, they have a monopoly on Barbados, actually.
Pardon? I don't.
So in a case where we are so heavily dependent on the US for what we import, um, does this document also give a structure of what is in that 88% of what exactly comes from the US?
Well, let us search through and see, if it details that. Um, but I'm not certain. But I think that information should be available. It should be available. So yeah, I will try to see if it's in here. So it said here, Nigel, in 2024, imports from the United States reached a record $1.6 billion. This small Barbados, imported $1.6 billion. This heavy concentration leaves Barbados vulnerable to U.S. tariff changes. Hear this part here, no? Hear this part. Like, while the recent 10% baseline tariff may not hit all categories equally, finding cost-effective alternative suppliers in the short term may prove challenging. Right? Now, I'm glad I spoke about that tariff issue because
Mhm.
you're not going to believe your eyes when you see what I said um, at the end of this write-up. So it shows you our main trading partners, the percentages of where we import from, CARICOM. Our biggest partners are the US, Trinidad, the United Kingdom. Those three. So remember, people say that Trinidad has massive investments in Barbados, what they do, and you can clearly see we import a lot from Trinidad. So why that will be important, right? Why that will be important, you will now see it in this particular section, which is box 2 of the central bank's report on the Barbados economy. And remember, alternate viewers, all of this information could not be in the media, but I'm saying to you that the media could do a substantially different job in terms of reporting on the actual content of the report, and offering the alternate view based on what is being said. Now, look at this, Nigel. It says, look at Barbados' evolving trade and relationships and export opportunities. Barbados' trading landscape is gradually evolving through vulnerable, even though, vulnerabilities remain. Imports from Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados' primary fuel supplier, peaked at $1 billion in 2008, but fell to $416 million by 2020, reflecting in a falling volume in fuel and prices. Right? So since the 2018 closure of the Trinidad and Tobago oil refinery, right? Since the closure of the oil refinery, Nigel, and you see the massive drop off in import fuel from Trinidad, right? Barbados then had to seek an alternate relationship to import fuel because the refinery has been shut down in Trinidad. I remember Trinidad is our largest Caribbean trading partner, right? So remember, we have many Trinidadian businesses in Barbados. Trinidad dominates our economic landscape to a certain extent, but our refinery we get oil from, which helps to power a lot of these Trinidadian businesses. By the way, we had a reduction in oil imports from them. So when you come down here, it shows you the excluding.
We ain't hear you.
Imports peaked at 242 million in 2022, led by fuel oil imports from Jamaica. Right? From Jamaica. So here you have it, Barbados replacing the oil imports from Trinidad due to the closure of the refinery, leading fuel imports from Jamaica. Right? And this is important because remember, you hear the government officials constantly speaking about oil prices and how you buy oil, and the price of oil is at 100 and XYZ a barrel, and they use the constant reference, Nigel, for oil prices as a reason why there could not be a decrease in the cost of living. Right? So oil is the major input to everything. So we hear the officials say that oil prices are high and therefore you can have a reduction in cost of living. Right? So I hope you guys are understanding now the shifts that occurred within the Barbados economy as it relates to the trading of oil and oil revenues. And as you can see, where Barbados got majority of its oil from recently. But the officials and the politicians, Nigeria, will get in parliament and other places and give Barbados and Barbadians the impression that we buy oil from OPEC and we buy oil from the big conglomerates down in Dubai and Arabia and those places. They give the impression that we buy oil from them. Right? So, not saying that if these guys may, do adverse things that it cannot impact the overall cost of a barrel of oil, Niger, right? But they give the impression that we directly import oil in large quantities from international markets over there, right? And any sneezing on misbehavior, then oil prices are up. So, yeah. So it goes on to say here, Nigel, and this part here is very important. Very important. It says here the impact of the US tariffs on exports. Right? Exports are not projected to be great. The impact of the US tariffs on exports are not projected to be great. No, put your hands up in the air, all of those economists who ran out in the public crying out about how bad Donald Trump's US tariff plan is and how much of a severe impact it's going to have on the Barbados economy. I could give you the names of those economists, but I don't want to give the names because there are few people I respect as well, right? But many of them were out there, and they told you guys on. I remember we did that alternate views. And we spoke about Trump's tariff plan, and we worked out the 10% and saw how little that 10% was.
For sure.
Right? You remember when we worked that out? I showed that it really won't have these tariffs really won't have a major impact on Barbados and Caribbean countries.
Mm-hmm.
And here is the central bank and the governor basically affirming that position. Right? So, alternate viewers, even if you're watching for the first time, pay close attention. Right? So, I'm going to read what it says here. On the export side, re-exports represents nearly 47% of general merchandise exports. United States remains Barbados' largest export destination, particularly for rum, jewelry, and sweet biscuits. Exports to the US peaked at 349 million in 2016 and have since recovered to 161 million in 2024. Despite recent tariff reform, the impact on Barbadian exports is expected to be moderate. And what does moderate mean, Nigel? Minuscule, very little, ain't already impact given the 10% rate applied. So why do you have economists and why do you have these so-called experts in the newspaper trying to give impressions, right? Trying to give impressions that Trump's tariff plan is so dangerous for Barbados and it's gonna cost all of these millions and crash. But here we have the central bank reporting calmly that it's expected to be moderate. And we worked that out a couple of weeks ago. If you go and pull up alternative views, as when we spoke about Trump and the tariff plan, you will clearly see, Nigel. Yeah, what we say. So, yeah, I want to stop there for a minute.
It fits the
Ask
narrative.
you.
I think we lost Kemar again. He's been having some internet issues from the start of the show. We can give him a second to clear up. But I hope the alternate viewers are paying attention. And this is all
Yeah,
information that
not a
you have
blackout.
access to as well.
I'm back now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you loud and clear.
Yeah. Nigel, can you hear me? Alternate viewers, can you hear me?
I got you loud and clear. Are you hearing me?
You're not hearing you at all, Nigel.
I can hear you. The viewers can hear you, and I can hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you. But my internet is the screen is gone again. So just as it was getting great, here we go again. Screen gone again. Locked out of the account. One more time, having to experience another internet blackout. So I want somebody to contain the amount of blackouts we had now. See if you can go ahead, Nigel.
Okay. Yes. Well, Kemar started out, as I was saying earlier, I hope we are all paying attention to this information. This is all public information, so there's
You
nothing that
muted, Nigel, or mute your mic if
no, they can hear me and I can hear you. Exactly.
well, I am not picking up Nigel, so clean. Um, you guys can hear me, but I can't hear him. So I am going to try to continue as I was saying. So the last point where I left off, I spoke about the economists who were speaking about Trump's tariff plan. We clearly saw, right? We clearly saw that the governor of the central bank would have said in his report, that it is not really going to impact the Barbados economy in any serious way. Right? Now, on the flip side, they could argue, right, on the flip side, right, on the flip side, for imports, so um, that's a whole nother discussion. But I did remember the economists speaking about that tariff plan and that export plan that countries exporting to the states will face, and I do remember all of them. And that show alternate viewers that we did, we're going to have to pull it up at some point in time and to remind them that alternate views led the discussion in a factual way. Right now, you guys remember, right? You guys remember because they locked off Nigel's microphone, so I can't hear him. Period. Right? But you guys remember, I want to look for that article now. Right? An article came out from the CEO of Invest Barbados. Right? An article came out from the CEO, right, from Invest Barbados, where we did that particular show, and it's not Invest Barbados, the Barbados Investment Development Corporation, Mr. Mark Hill. Right? An article came out by Mr. Mark Hill after we did that show. Whoa, still can't get back onto this thing at all. Right, here I have it. So I am going to sign out and sign back in a bit, Nigel, because I'm not getting your mic at all.
Go
So I
ahead.
can try to do it. But before I do, I just want to put up this thing from Mark Hill. And go ahead, and then I'm going to sign out and let Nigel um let Nigel go ahead. So the article came out from Mark Hill. Hey, from Mark Hill after we did that show on China, America, XYZ. And here you have it, Mr. Mark Hill saying rethink trade strategies, right? Amid US China tensions, export promoter. Export promoter. And it says here, business, especially small and medium-sized businesses, must immediately transform their import strategies to mitigate risk factors from global trade disruptions and seize emerging opportunities. Mark Hill, CEO of Export Barbados, BADC. Speaking against the backdrop of escalating US trade tensions, Hill emphasized the importance of securing long-term agreements to ensure economic stability. Hill described the ongoing tariff dispute reignited last week under the Trump administration as a wake-up call for Barbados to address its economic vulnerabilities and pivot towards long-term stable trade practices. He explained that Barbados operates primarily as an import-export economy rather than an export-import economy. Well, as an import-export rather than an export-import. This means that local production is heavily dependent on imported goods, fuel, construction materials, machinery, and even food and beverages. In 2024, Barbados generated over 6 billion in overall economic activity, which was facilitated by approximately $2 billion in imported goods. Right? It goes on to say here, Nigel, that Barbados imports around $90 million from China and roughly 800 million from the US. So here is it again that the US dominating the Barbados economy, right? Here by their admission, the US dominates the Barbados economy, but the governor's admission, the US dominates the Barbados economy. He said, while exporting only 1.2 million to China and between 80 to 90 million to the US. This is Barbados exporting to the US. This imbalance contributes to a trade deficit of about 1.6 billion, which is both a concern and a significant opportunity for the private sector to step in. According to Hill, the current US trade war exposes the structural vulnerabilities of economies like Barbados. In the short to medium term, we expect China to have significant surplus output, which can result in lower costs, which can result in lower costs for imported goods. So here he's saying in the short term, we expect China to have significant surplus output, which means that they're looking to China. And says that this presents an opportunity to reduce input costs through strategic procurement from China. On the other hand, we expect increased import costs from the USA driven by capital market fluctuation. I don't get too technical. For businesses rely on US components or goods, this will necessitate a rethinking of sourcing strategies. Remember, guys, remember the figures he gave. Barbados imports around $800 million from the States and 90 from China, right? And they're saying that they want to rethink strategies. But how you can close a deficit that way? You know, that's drastic change right there. But you know, we will keep reading and see what he's saying. It says here, basically, and this is basically the same things that we were saying on our show, that the current US trade policy could open doors for Barbados exporters. He pointed to CARICOM and he pointed to a shifting global landscape that could bring the Caribbean together. A lot of what we were saying. And he said the soon to be Import-Export Bank initiative by Barbados will assist to make this shift. And he said that's how we will close the trade deficit and begin to move towards a trade surplus. It's not just about trade, it's about transformation. Now, I don't know how you close on the $800 million deficit to bring a trade plus. To bring a trade surplus, I don't know how you're doing that. To close an $800 million deficit, right? To bring a trade surplus that you have with the States, are you trying to make up that way the deficit with China, where you only trade $90 million worth of goods with strategically? So, my brother Nigel, made some sense to me out of this tariff business.
It sounds to me, and how they're presenting the information, it's not they're presenting the information accurately, but they're skewing it for a specific purpose. So how it sounds to me, they're trying to push the narrative of let's get rid of our relationship with the US for favor of the relationship to be built with China. However, based on the central bank's report, those tariffs that were imposed by the US have, as they said, the word they used was moderate, which is pretty minimal. So it wouldn't have a big or great effect. I would ask why it is that the information is being skewed in that way, but we have yet to see how that would unfold. But this information is pretty clear to see.
Yeah, well, thank you, my brother. Um, Thank you for putting it in the comments on the show that we will address it. So check out episode 2 of season 3 alternate views for those persons who want to check it out. It's where we discuss how the US tariffs would affect Barbados and the Barbados economy. You can go and check that out. Check out what we said on there and compare what was said tonight and compare what was said by Mr. Mark Hill. So I think this was also said on the show by Rashid Griffith as well, that it is a fallacy, right? It is a fallacy to give persons the impression that you can just up and shift trade partners just like that, right? Because with an $800 million deficit, right? With an $800 million, how are you going to close such a wide trade deficit with China in such a short space of time that would really slow down any severe impacts on small open economies like Barbados? Is just not a fact. So the question then comes up: should we be working um, much more in tandem with? Should we be tying our foreign policy more towards the United States, given that we have such a large trade deficit with them? Um, what room is there for China? Um, Remember also, Barbados is very small in size, so it will be considered a pawn state in the grand scheme of things, because both countries have the financial power to buy out the whole of Barbados a trillion times over, right? So, how are we positioned? How are we being positioned? That is a question that should be answered by the political directorate and those persons who, occupy the space right now. Let us stroll on, Nigel, because we want to get to the end of this central bank report. Is already coming up to the last 20 minutes on the show, so I want to get through here, Nigel, quickly. So yeah, we stopped there at the tariff situation. So let us come past the tariff situation. I want to show you what I call a conundrum or confusion, people. It goes on to say in box 3 that the US government's imposition of a 10% baseline tariff on all imports introduces a meaningful downside risk to Barbados economy. As a small, open economy deeply integrated with the US through trade and tourism, Barbados faces pressure on imports, inflation, and fiscal performance. So on one line, right, on one line, they're saying, right, this is the central bank report. On one line, they're saying that the impact will be minuscule, moderate, sorry, look it's here. They expect it to be moderate given the 10% rate applied. On one view, they're saying that. And then when you come in the next box, they're saying here now that the imposition of the tariffs introduced a downside. Right? So explain to me, which one is it really? Is it moderate, or do we have meaningful downside risk? Because it's saying both things in the same report. So we need to have a better understanding of what are you really saying. Right? Come down quickly. Right? It says here tourism is also vulnerable. Right? Tourism is also vulnerable. And it says that including a potential slowdown in the US economy, cost impact on tariffs, and the fact that there may be reduced travel and reduced United States spending, right? Reduce United States spending and weaken airline connectivity where there's the canceling of flights, Nigel, right? And an overall decrease in US travel spending, Nigel, can result in massive losses, right? Can result in massive losses, substantial losses for the Barbados economy, further plunging the tourism forecast further down. Right? I remember we started by saying, putting it on the screen that the growth in GDP was 2.6% based off a robust tourism. We broke it down that tourism was mainly fueled by in-transit visitors.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And here you have it now saying that tourism is further vulnerable because persons coming from the source markets may have reduced income and a reduced appetite to travel, basically. So again, Barbados is in a further tailspin as it relates to depending on tourism, which is the main earner, right? Tourism is the main earner, and if the main income earner for Barbados in terms of foreign exchange is a serious problem, then the overall country, Niger, is in a very serious problem. So,
Mm-hmm.
any thoughts from you?
Well, this is all new information to me, and I'm digesting it. Uh, my only thought would be, given the circumstance that we're in, given all the information that's being presented, are we too far gone and we just gotta let it train, right? Or are there actual things that we can do to whether mitigate or soften the impacts that um, these global trade wars, these skewed numbers and all of this? What is it that can be done, if anything?
Well, that is where, Nigel, you have to tune into the NNP, the New National Party of Barbados, to get those solutions. Tonight is not necessarily the solutions night. Tonight is analysis night. We want to break down the issues, open them up. But as it relates to solutions, you'll hear about a lot of solutions as the NNP roll out their platform. So I want to encourage you, my brother. Um, Given that this is a non-political
For
show,
sure.
the solutions will happen over on that platform. I hope you understand.
For sure. So I'm speaking from a average layman perspective because it's a lot of information to take in, and I would assume just as me, there's okay. So what is the whole point? But we will stay tuned to that. This class is in session, so we got to take it in parts. So the analysis will give you a clear picture of what the actual issue is, what are the parts that make up the entire issue, and then we will wait for proposed solutions. Looking forward to that.
Well, thank you, my brother. We have a few more minutes, so I want to finish the analysis on this report quickly, and then let's try to get into a short discussion. I'll probably answer a question or two. Um, Now, my last point here, though, I want to focus on is something called interest repayment, right, Nigel? Let's just start sharing that for a bit. But interest repayment. So I want to look at interest repayment from the perspective of um, Barbados had to pay substantially more money than usual in interest payments, right? So interest payment obviously stems from the fact that you are indebted. So you have to be earning enough money to be able to pay off the interest on the debt when it becomes due, and still manage the country in terms of ministries, like giving it over to health, giving it over to education, giving it over to housing. XYZ. Interest payments, Nigel, are eating the revenue our government makes, eating that revenue out, sending it out of the country, and the people basically are feeling the brunt of the knife, especially given the fact that we're under a structural adjustment IMF program. Right? So we have to pay substantially more money than usual in debt repayments. I have tried to find that chart where you could see it. Um, and I'm going to end on that one. So the governor reported in his presentation, Nigel, about interest. And he spoke about interest tied to variable interest rates, right? Remember we did something on variable interest rates before on alternate views, and we would have said that the variable interest rate, Barbados was facing a massive jump in variable interest rate and the cost, right? So I want to ask the governor or some official, how many of our loans are tied to variable interest rates, and what further increases do you see in terms of these variable interest rates? And is Barbados equipped enough to manage, right? Are taxation levels high enough? Are we earning enough to manage any spikes, Nigel, in the variable interest rate? Because realistically, every time there's a world shock in the economy and the variable rate goes up, that means there's an increased burden on the taxpayers of Barbados, and we have to look for more money to pay interest every time these rates go up. Now, these rates are out of our hands as a country, right? These rates are not necessarily determined by the commercial banks, right? These rates are connected to the global financial system. And every time there's a shock in the system and these rates go up, Barbados is then taxed extra
Correct.
to be able to have to pay these interest. So I want to ask, Nigel, right? What what more loans do we have that are tied to these variable interest rates? And do we have the adequate buffers and resources in place to be able to manage the spikes in these interest rates? Because who's to say we don't have to back financial crisis, right? And then there's a 7 or 8% spike, Nigel, in world interest rates. Where will Barbados get the money from to be able to sustain any further increases, Nigel, in these US denominated dollar loans, like, to help save the economy and the country? Over to you, sir.
More loans, more loans. That has seemed to be the fix, or at least a um temporary covering. However, based on the information being presented, the foresight of that type of model is not going to work, and it's not going to last. If it is that we are under the IMF, we are born from the IMF, and the interest rates, as you said, are variable and they can increase at the whim of any global crisis. And then to add the fact that we are not really hitting those IMF targets. So what would we be left to grab on? Again, I can speak from a layman's perspective that it don't make no sense. The two and making four in this circumstance, and there's not being enough information put forward with integrity to let the people really understand the situation that they're in and what they can do, if anything, to help bear the brunt of this. It is wicked. I would say it's a wicked system going on right now.
Well, At least we acknowledge these things for what they are. However, we like to report the facts. We like to paint the truthful picture as to what it really is, what actually happened. Um, so I want the people, based off the information you saw here, to pose some questions to the officials. You could ask yourself in the different analysis put forward by the various persons. If you learn anything different on alternate views, as you saw, we put everything basically on the screen for you to see. And we put everything on the screen for you to see. So I mean, Nigel, you can't have you can't have in school they say you get your answer, but you ain't got no working.
You need your
Right?
working.
We
Prove
show
it.
all of our working here tonight. So let me just pull up the last thing that we discussed, and that is the debt service. So just want to show persons on wrapping up because we are definitely coming in at 10. So in wrapping up, we're going to read about debt and financing. So it says here, higher amortization increase the government's financing needs in financial year 2024 to 2025. And it says that the net financing of government went up to $1.5 billion, up from up 677 million from the previous year. Right? So amortization is just basically something like interest, right? So it says that amortization accounted for much of the rise, reaching 7.5% of GDP, and that excluded the debt for nature swap and a prepaid 38 million in debt service. Right? So it says although the primary surplus, which is what government earned minus what the spending, provided some offset the same. You see how much surplus the government made. The government made $662 million in surplus. So it shows you that the government has money, or they're earning money. I should say they're earning money, right? They're earning money because they earn $662 million in surplus. But then it went on to say that total debt service, Nigel,
Rose.
rose to 14%, up from 9%. Right? So you see that there's a general increase in debt service across government, and it shows you definitely that the debt service on all of these loans and all of these different arrangements that we are entering into is not necessarily providing us the best opportunity because we have to keep the tax rates up to be able to afford the payments on these loans. And this is essentially what you call, in simple terms, as defined by economist Anthony Wood, as defined by economist Michael Howard, simply defined as a debt trap. So in signing off, we're going to read this last one. It says, interest payments increased due to higher debt levels and rising interest rates. Total interest costs increased by 42 million, as external interest payments rose by 27 million, driven by new project and policy related borrowings for 2023 and 2024, as well as higher interest on some variable rate debt. So I am asking the question to the governor, could you give us all of the loans that have these variable rates attached to them? And what are the projected financial increases? Right? Have you accounted for any potential financial increases that Barbados could absorb whenever these variable loans go up? And it is right here in the central bank's report that these variable loans, Nigel, are definitely contributing to higher interest costs in Barbados. And that is basically the aim of tonight's presentation. We're up at close to 10 o'clock. So, Nigel, my brother, um, your thoughts.
Uh, Good lesson as always, man. I feel like you're back in school every time I alternate views, and it's not just surface level information. It's information with some substance, with a lot of depth, that allows the average Bayesian to understand what is really going on in his country and with his economy. And we will hope that we can turn to our leaders who we put in position to guide the country. For they're supposed to be you hear me? For they're supposed to be the ones that has the information. And if they don't have the information and they're trying something, nobody's perfect. Even those in those positions, although the weight is heavy, at least they can be transparent with their people and honest with their people. I find you would get more buy-in, you would get more help from a man if you could tell you, well, listen, this is what really going on. And that's all we're asking for. Tell the people what really going on. At least give them a stake in what's going on. And then further, if we're not getting the results that we need to get, then the people again would have the power to make a choice. Because again, this is a democracy, or at least it's supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. But thank you, my brother. It was good to get you on, it's good, definitely always to have you in the discussion. I'm sure the alternate viewers love having you on, as you always you bring an alternate view to alternate views. So it is
Sure.
great as usual to have you here. So yeah, express gratitude to all the alternate viewers tonight. Tonight was more educational, so I hope you enjoyed the information. Um, this was the analysis, or my analysis of the central bank report. Like I said, a totally professional critique. Excuse me, totally professional critique. And I want to thank you all for tuning in to tonight's discussion. I had a very good time. Um, we're not going to go on much further. As I said, it is 10. So, Nigel, any parting words from you before we sign off?
Just good night to all the alternate viewers. Thank you for tuning in once again. Uh, Pay attention and share this information. Really share this information in your daily passing, those in your sphere of influences. Ask them a question. Tell them something. Ask them, you know this? You know this happening? Are you aware of what's going on? And if they're more interested, then we have alternate views that is always live on YouTube. You could pull up all the past episodes that would show you exactly and paint a roadmap to what it is that's really going on with the economy of Barbados. And with that, good night and have a great weekend, alternative viewers. Back to you, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah. Thank you, my brother. Thank you to all those alternate viewers. Don't forget to like alternate views before you sign off. Don't forget to share alternate views. And I will see you guys. We're going to at least put up some of the comments on the screen. We're going to put the comments till we sign off. So we can't get all in, but you know, we're going to try to get some in. Uh, yeah.
Okay, world Pedro Jamont says world trade will be renegotiated. It's looking like that. It is looking like that. Next comment. Square 4. Excellent, Mr. Franklin. You have common sense. They have muted you and you posted it. You gotta think quick on your foot, man. You gotta be quick on your foot. Big it up, Square 4. Tyrone Norse says this discussion worth its money in gold. Kemar, you're the only promising leader to take Barbados out of this mess. I hope the people see this. Who has eyes to see? Let them see. Lemuel Tull, isn't a tariff a tax on imports? Why are they trying to fool the people? What does US import from Barbados? Sweet biscuits, rum, etc. Pedro Jamont says, double speak, don't try to understand. Mhm. Merwinette says several people worked on sections of the report, but did not collaborate, or everything reported is a story. Twisted for sure. It's there for you to see. It is there for you to see. Pedro Jamont says, Nigel, there are only two choices, China or USA. Where you gonna pick one or the other? We are satellites of none, right? And friends of all. Spirit Force says, good night to lifelong learning and their family. Big up lifelong learning. For sure, lifelong learners. Good night to the staff and their families of the Caribbean Progress Studies Institute. For sure. All the time. All these sponsors of alternative views. Tyrone there says, like and share, people. This information is dynamite. Learn at your highest level. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the plan. Square four, good night to alternate viewers from England, Scotland, and Ireland. All the international viewers. We welcome you and continue to support. We definitely are grateful. Definitely are grateful. Marinette says, for a small economy, how is it that variable interest rates were imposed or then agreed to by government? That's a great question. I would assume, you would debate in favor of yourself. However, it seems like our hands are tight. Tyrone there says, if a person who works for a salary and have to borrow money to support his household, would his family live a comfortable lifestyle? Absolutely not. You're at the beck and call of whoever you're borrowing from. Okay, Mr. Angel says, thanks to the panel and all viewers. Bless up, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on another Thursday night. Pedro Jamont says, guidance, brothers, and Kemar, best wishes. Keep blessed, bro. Be yourself, Fabian. Adrian X says, this is one of the best programs in Barbados, and I'm not being biased. We appreciate that review. We appreciate that. I think so too. Tyrone Nurse, good night, all. All right, everybody. As always, I can left the closing statements to Mr. Stuart. Thank you again, brother. You're doing Barbados a great favor.
Yes, well, alternative viewers, we've come to yet the end of yet another Thursday. Had a very good discussion with you as usual. Um, I am hoping that you learn a lot tonight. I am hoping that you could challenge different perspectives. I am hoping that you saw the differences in reporting. I'm hoping that you saw the contradictions. And as you say, we showed our working tonight, detail for detail. Right? So we are hoping that our perspective could be shared widely and fairly and freely to everyone who watched tonight, as there are serious questions that need to be answered about what was published in the central bank report. And as we said, this was a completely professional analysis, and that is how we go. So, congratulations to the governor and his team for the publication of the report, Nigel. However comprehensive it was, and we look forward to hearing an alternate perspective on what we would have shared tonight on the report if we are afforded such luxuries. So thank you very much, my brother. Thank you all alternate viewers. Had a great show tonight. We're going to sign off now. Tune in next week again, as we promised to have a great show. I think we may have a guest next week. So look forward to the guests as we keep this program rolling. So alternate views, everyone. I will be seeing you guys next week.